This is Dead Serious, a show about short horror stories worthy of discussion. I'm Dead Palette, and I'm writing a Life is Strange / Max Payne fanfiction called Max Life Consequences. Today, we are taking a look at The Hug Me Virus, written by Evil Black Bunny. This story has been given to us by a patron, Evil Black Bunny. We will try and be as honest on it as possible, and if you could give feedback in the comments, I'm sure she would appreciate it greatly. Alright, let's get right into it. It's not the end of the world, but that's the way people are acting. The way people are acting makes it seem so, illiterate right off the beginning, unable to say a single sentence before I stumbled over my words. Okay. It started like any vaccine would. Careful work, day and night, in a lab. Funded by the government. That's funded by people that pay taxes for some measure of security. Months of work and hundreds of vials. Half a dozen donated human brain tissue samples and comparative slides. Blood work and lab trials that led up to clinical trials that led up to, ellipses, something amazing. Okay, blind reading this, but I gotta say, right off the bat, I really like the build-up here. It's got me interested. If I found this story in the wild, I would keep reading. Vaccines are a touchy subject for a lot of people. I don't have many socio-political or philosophical beliefs, but vaccines are a good thing, is a hill I'm willing to die on. I think because vaccines are such a controversial thing for some people, that this will intrigue people and make them want to read more. But let's press on. We don't have a whole lot of information yet. A vaccine created to fight and, in time, cure a debilitating mental illness, debilitating mental illness of clinical depression. Not the cure for cancer, but a breakthrough. It worked. It, honest to God, 100% worked. Daily medication and weekly visits to the shrink were traded off for fun days off and nights on the town. All thanks to a bi-monthly vaccine cooked up in a lab for a big government paycheck. Okay, so I am scientifically illiterate, but I'm fairly certain that vaccines don't work that way, where you need to have them re-upped every 2 weeks. I'm fairly certain that they last a little bit longer than that. I'm not sure what they mean by this, but Evil Black Bunny, when they sent this to me, wrote in the email, the Hug Me Virus, aka what happens when you have an idea but don't fully understand vaccines. So we're going to bear that in mind. I don't know if she's referring to not understanding, her not understanding, or the narrator understanding, whether it's author or narrator. But let's press on. Not the cure for, okay. Yes, after some time, it backfired. The clinical trials were fine, but that's because the scientists and doctors behind them knew what they were looking for. They only had people diagnosed with some form of depression by professionals. They didn't just pluck someone off the streets. They wanted actual, legit test subjects. There was too much money riding on the vaccines being effective for mistakes. So this is a very real-world problem of depression and clinical depression being two different things, and having things like major depressive disorder. These are all very soft terms, and whenever someone says depression, you really got to clarify what they mean by that. And it's also really hard to get into the mind and dig around and figure out, well, you have this disease and this other person has this disease, and they present similarly, but they're actually two different things, and they have two different causes and things of this nature. It gets very confusing very quickly, and a lot of the time scientists are confused on these kinds of things. The DSM-4 is well known for having ridiculous things in it, like homosexuality being a mental disorder and things of this nature. It's all very hard to concretely say this is that and this is that. And so this is fodder for there being some sort of mix-up, and I think that that's what we're trying to explore here, I'm guessing. And I suppose that means that we should touch on the subject of, can a vaccine cure depression? Because depression is not a contagious disease, as far as we know. So again, little ridiculous of a concept. I'm not sure how far into the realm of science fiction we're going to go, but I feel as though we're going to go pretty deep into science fiction with this story, as opposed to realism, the kind of horror that's in my wheelhouse. So let's press on. Yeah, the vaccine worked, but the illness had to be present inside of a human brain for the vaccine to work. Do you know how many people get misdiagnosed every day because too many psychiatrists see a paycheck instead of a patient? Because people don't realize what depression actually is or how it works? Psychiatrists know how it works. That's why some of them throw a prescription pad at a frown instead of taking the time to do their job and listen. Okay, with this, there's stuff here that I like and stuff here that I don't much care for. I like that we're exploring the cynical nature of psychiatrists and our tendency to throw pills at problems rather than address the problems themselves, and how ethical that is. But what do we mean by you have to have the illness present in the brain? What a vaccine is a weakened form of the actual disease that builds up your immune system in that way. So by the strictest definition, I think that it is possible for there to be something along the lines of a vaccine-like thing for depression when there's a chemical imbalance in the brain, something that would realign the amount of certain chemicals in your brain to where you don't have those depressive feelings. But by the strictest definition, I don't think you can call that a vaccine. If you are scientifically literate, please tell me whether I'm wrong or the author's wrong or we're both wrong. I think we're both wrong. But let's press on. 6 months of injections, of bliss, of breakthrough moments all over the country. 6 months before the first incident hit the news, a mother of 2 had picked her toddler up from daycare and greeted her with a hug. The mother, overjoyed, hugged back and shortly caved in her little girl's ribs. She smiled and snuggled her screaming little child and didn't let go until the police came. The mother attempted to give a cop the same hug. She left behind a husband and a 5-year-old boy. Okay. So there's something to this. I think the wording in this paragraph is a little clunky from a technical perspective. I think it could be tightened up a little bit. But in terms of what's being presented, I think that they're going with my theory that you're trying to mess with the chemicals in the brain to make people more happy and have less of those depressive feelings and have more serotonin, I think, is the thing that is in your brain that makes you be happy. If that is the case, then having too much of that would potentially put you in a position where you lose your senses and you're just too happy, but I don't know how you would function outside of that. Like, would you be able to drive a car if you were in that state of happy delirium? These are questions I have. It wasn't anything major. It was tragic, but nothing too terrifying. You can find worse things on Reddit, for God's sake. It was a thing that happened, but it was one isolated incident. At this point, I would have to ask what your goals are as an author, because I don't want to presume that the goals of Evil Black Bunny are my goals as an author. I want to help them be the best form of them, not be the best form of me or a version of them that is more like me. But I would suggest maybe we have dates and times and names and specifics like the who, what, when, where, why, to make this feel more generalistic. So where are we getting this report from? It says you can find worse things on Reddit. Maybe you just find this instance on Reddit. I'm sure that it would, if this happened, it would be posted on Reddit as something interesting that happened or a horror tale from Reddit. So bearing those things in mind, maybe you might want to consider naming the mother, naming the police officer, naming the daughter. Anyway, until the next one, 4 months later, elderly man hugged his wife to death. They were both in their 80s, frail things. When she died of crushed ribs and internal bleeding, he fractured an arm and a few ribs, but he never stopped smiling. It became a trend. Only adults were doing these hugs of death, but then the rare teenager hugged their BFF to death. We were looking for patterns that weren't there, hunting for links that weren't available to the public. Okay, so this vaccine turns people into a series of Lennies from Of Mice and Men, and I like that. I like the idea of injecting people, and now they're Lenny from Of Mice and Men, and they just want to hug all the rabbits. It says that we were hunting for links that weren't available to the public. I'm assuming by that you mean the medical community or whatever pharmaceutical company came up with this quote-unquote vaccine. If we're not allowed to know who we are, who the narrator is, I would like to have that be stated explicitly. Like, I can't tell you who I am because I would get in trouble, and I've signed a non-disclosure agreement or something like that, or a non-disparagement clause, something of those lines. There should be some reason for the secrecy if we're not allowed to know who we are as the narrator. And certainly we would have the knowledge that there is depression out there and that maybe there's some sort of link to the depression vaccine. Anyway, the people figured it out eventually. None of the people that had done these hugs of death had been diagnosed with any form of depression. They all had the vaccine. Okay, there we go. Think about this. 7% of adults in the United States have depression. Roughly 12% of the population had gotten the vaccine. The only thing needed to get the vaccine in some states was a goddamn checklist of signs. If you met the criteria, you got the needle. Fuck accuracy and proper medical procedure. They've got a miracle drug. All right, perfect. Pharmaceutical company wants to sell these drugs to make money. One thing that's worth noting is that typically, maybe this is something different because I think we've covered that this might not be exactly a quote-unquote vaccine. Maybe this is something that the media has called this. Maybe I'm being too generous with that. But vaccines are typically very cheap compared to preventative medicine is better than treatment in terms of money. So the vaccines aren't going to net you a giant profit. But there you go. And we're starting to get numbers and everything. All right. It was dubbed the Hug Me virus by the media. It's not a virus. It's a chemical imbalance in the brain, like the depression that doctors wanted to cure. But what it's done has made these people without depression become manic. Not the medical kind of manic or the drug-induced manic. Full-on, stereotypical, cacklingly mad. Cackling mad. Cackling mania. Man, Brandon, read what is actually there on the monitor. Jesus Christ. Okay. They seem normal until they make eye contact. They didn't, at first, seem dangerous. Would you turn down a big, smiling hug from your father, your wife, your grandmother? Yes, I would, because I'm not a hug person. All forms of public display of affection were prohibited in a case of national security. Few protested, and those that did learned fast that hugs in public got you tasered and quarantined. To get the point across, the media did a special on the survivors. That's funny. I love the idea that you have to, it's like, national state of emergency, you're not allowed to hug people. That's great. So we have been getting super viruses, and this is a result of over-prescribing antibacterial soap and things of this nature. So I'm beginning to wonder if this is a commentary on that. Overprescribing this vaccine has led to unintended consequences, just as people using hand sanitizer like crazy has led to unintended consequences of like superbugs and things of this nature. Because when you kill 99.9% of germs, those that survive are like the master race of germs, and they multiply and things get out of hand pretty quick. Anyway, Not everyone hugged died, but surviving was a nightmare. Cracked ribs and paralysis in teenagers, spinal fractures in grown men. They interviewed a 7-year-old girl who would scream and cry if anyone touched her. Her daddy hugged her so hard that her lungs collapsed. People infected by the Hug Me virus were being located, carted off to quarantine, carted off to quarantine and tested and terminated, no doubt. That's kind of phrased bizarrely. Carted off to quarantine and tested and terminated, no doubt. That's how it's gonna have to be. Blood and brain tissue samples from people who don't know that their hugs snap ribs and kill. The vaccine is off the market and has been for months after the fact. I hear scientists, the same ones that made the vaccine, are looking for a cure. Back to the drawing board. Okay, so here we have confirmation that we're not a scientist and we don't have some sort of reason for not stating who we are. I feel that would be pertinent. And that kind of information is probably important. What we're talking about has wide-scale ramifications, and if that is the case, I would say that this would probably work better as a longer story. Obviously, I only really look at short stories, or pare it down and not have a national outbreak. Maybe write the story before such an outbreak has happened, and we only have 1 or 2 incidences, and we see that there's going to be a massive problem in the future. Because this is a very big story in terms of ramification, if that makes any sense. The story itself might be short, but the story it's telling is a big story, and so it needs room to breathe and to have that gravitas, if that makes any sense. Back to the drawing board. But I don't know we need to worry too much. It's not so bad. Yeah, it's bad, but it's not the end of the world. People will die, but they do every day. I'm not being heartless. I'm being realistic. How do we know a cure won't backfire again? We don't, but people want to try. I know it's dangerous out there, but talking about this makes me remember how long I've been cooped up. Studio apartments are tiny, and I'm running out of food. Still, despite the bullshit going on outside, I'm feeling okay. Better than okay. I could be doing better, though. Maybe I just need a hug. Okay, I like the ending. That's a cute little ending. So looking at this story, my girlfriend, who is much more scientifically literate than me, ran some numbers and kind of looked at this. 7% of the U.S. population is over 3 million people, and that's about the amount of people that live in Iowa. So we're talking about the state of Iowa being crazy and hugging people. That would be so astronomically big that is disaster levels of like Walking Dead, Left 4 Dead, zombie movie. I like that this is a twist on a zombie concept, that it's not just there are zombies out there and here's our version of zombie and we're going to sell you on our version of zombie. This is something completely different. We have these crazy Lenny rabbit huggers out there. That is awesome. But I think that this definitely needs a shift in point of view in how the story is being told to us. And we need to understand the gravity of how many people are going to die in this kind of story. You don't want to treat that with kid gloves. If you're going to have a Holocaust, you gotta treat it like it's a Holocaust, if that makes any sense. I hope that if you're listening to this, you can help give some constructive criticism to this story. Thank you for sending me this story, Evil Black Bunny. I appreciate it. And I hope you get something out of my criticism. But I think it's time that we wrap this up and go on to our sponsor of the day. Judy X Nick. Judy X Nick. What makes you think that that's okay?